Morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. My name's Karen Woodhead, and I lead communications here at Smoothwall. And I think I've met several of you who are joining this morning at some point over the years, but welcome everyone. Before I introduce Rob and we get underway, I just want to make a few housekeeping points. Rob is going to be taking us through what digital monitoring is, and he's going to be taking us through Smoothwall Monitor in particular as well. But this is your session. It's your session to understand and to learn and to ask us any questions. So please include your questions in the chat below. As and when they occur to you, that's fine. We will make sure we have time at the end to go through every question. And anything that we can't answer here, we'll get straight back to you offline. It's really important that we do that. If you want to unmute and speak up, you're more than welcome, whichever you feel comfortable with. We're happy either way. During this webinar, we really want to hear about your experiences of digital safety in your own environmental settings. So we're going to be running some polls. There'll be 3 polls throughout the webinar. We'd love to hear from you. Nothing to do on that right now. We'll let you know exactly when they're going to come up, and they'll only take a few seconds as we go through. We are recording this session and we will share that tomorrow. If you want a more in-depth walkthrough of Smoothwall Monitor after this session, maybe for colleagues who couldn't make it here today, let me know. That's absolutely fine. I'll set that up for you. Just email us at enquiries@smoothwall.com. I'm on the other end of that webinar. On the other end of that email. Myself and my colleague Adele see everything that comes in on that. So just drop us a line and we'll sort that out for you. So with that, I'll hand over to our technical director and monitoring expert, who is Rob Faulkner. And thank you for joining us today. Can't wait. Over to you, Rob.
Thanks, Karen. So hi, everyone. Yeah, really good to speak with you all this morning. Really good to see, such a high turnout for what is, I think we all agree, a very important topic, concerning the digital safeguarding of students that are in our care. So without further ado, let's have a look at what we'll be covering this morning. So let's see, there we go. So we'll start off by covering what is digital monitoring, what it is, how does it work, how does it help us spot risks, including child-on-child abuse, which is a key focus of keeping children safe in education going into this year. We'll talk a little bit around the consultation that's happening with KICSI. We'll look at some of the myths around digital monitoring and hopefully, bust some of those myths, if you will. We'll look at the practicalities, so how it can save DSLs valuable time and allow them to focus on what's really important to them. And then we'll go through whatever questions you might have. So, as Karen says, please feel free to use the chat to pop those questions in, and we'll cover those at the end. So, digital monitoring, what is it? So, digital monitoring is all about identifying students that are at risk based on what they do, what they say, what they're sharing in their digital lives. So this is what's happening on their digital devices, their laptops, computers, things like that, which ordinarily teachers, parents might not see and therefore might go unnoticed. So it's really an assistant to the DSL, allowing that DSL to spot at-risk students that they wouldn't ordinarily be able to do using their eyes and ears alone. So, a teacher in a classroom environment isn't able to see everything that's going on 30 kids all on computers, particularly if they're working from home. There's lockdown, whatever, or there's kind of blended learning where they're doing some work from home. It really helps broaden the scope of the DSL to be able to monitor all those different learning environments and settings. So how does it work? Firstly, we have the pupil on a device. So as I mentioned, that might be a laptop, a desktop computer, a tablet, wherever that student is. They might be at home, might be at school, whatever they're doing on that school-owned device. The digital monitoring software would be looking at that and trying to identify what might be going on there. So they're typing away, doing that activity on that device. If they type particular things that might be a risk, they are triggered into our service, so our cloud-based system that is monitoring those devices. And an initial assessment of that thing that's been typed takes place. So we use artificial intelligence and rule-based systems that look at what they're typing. So they might have typed in, "I love maths." There's nothing particularly wrong about that. In fact, that's great. Or certainly I would say that, I'm a kind of techie nerdy guy, so I love maths as well. But, the AI is going to look at that and say, that's fine. But they might be typing in something else that has either a very obvious concern, like I'm going to hurt myself, or it might be something that's perhaps grey. It needs further investigation, whether or not that is a clear risk or a developing risk or an underlying risk, something associated with what they've typed. So if it is that kind of high risk, that goes into a human moderation team. So that's what Smooth will provide, a human moderation service, where a team of trained moderators will look at that and look at not only is that individual thing they've typed of concern, but in context of what else they've been doing recently, is that indicating that there is some kind of risk there. So you can see the bottom path. If there is a high risk that moderation team decide is of crucial importance, then the DSLs alerted. And that might be via phone call for very imminent, urgent risks. So a threat to life, imminent risk of harm. We will phone the DSLs at the school. For slightly less important, but still important risks, they will go through via email to the DSLs at the school. But if it's a lower risk, so either something that's kind of completely safe or is kind of quite a low level concern, that gets stored in the digital monitoring dashboard. So that is a place where the DSLs can log into and review those risks at their leisure. Any incidents as well over a certain threshold can automatically go into the school's record keeping system. So if that's CPOMS, My Concern, or Smoothwall's Safeguard Record Manager, those risks will be transferred into that as well. So that really helps maintain that chronology of that student's digital and also other concerns that may have come elsewhere from the school in that single record management system. So what you've got essentially is the online record of that student's digital activity, but you've got that you've got that safety net that if there's anything that's very urgent and important, you'll still get a phone call to alert you to that. So you don't have to be checking your email constantly for high risk threats. You'll get that phone call for anything where you need to immediately jump into action and intervene and give that student the support that they need. So that's digital monitoring. There's different products on the market that work in slightly different ways, but this is what we operate and what we strongly believe is the kind of gold standard in digital monitoring, with the human moderation to make sure that those risks have been curated in a way. They've been reviewed so that you don't end up having to do a lot of that manual reviewing yourself. So that really supports really strongly what the Department for Education have been advocating for last year and this year in keeping children safe in education, which is the statutory guidance they produce in consultation with the Safer Internet Centre and schools, MATs, councils and other educational settings across the UK. One of the things that they are doing at the moment is the consultation for the new version of KICSI, which typically comes out, I think, in around September time. So right now they've started their consultation process for 2022. What we saw in 2021 last year was a much stronger emphasis on digital monitoring and use of digital monitoring tools like Smoothwall Monitor. And they're really bolstering that in 2022 with two key areas. The first one is around child-on-child abuse. They used to call this peer-on-peer abuse. They've now renamed it to child-on-child abuse. And what this really talks about is there are a couple of key areas that schools really need to be looking out for and intervening early with, particularly bullying between children, whether that's cyberbullying, whether it's prejudice-based or discriminatory bullying, looking at abuse in intimate personal relationships between children, what sometimes gets called teenage relationship abuse, looking at physical abuse between children, so things like hitting, kicking, biting, hair pulling, which isn't often a digital risk, but there might be evidence or information about that physical abuse that comes through in digital communications and things like that, which will alert you to that's going on. It covers sexual violence between children, such as rape, and it also covers sexual harassment between children, sexual comments, remarks, jokes, which very much is a thing that happens extensively online. So again, a digital monitoring tool helps reveal these things that ordinarily physical monitoring, walking around a classroom, walking around the playground, is difficult to pick up on. So there's a lot of changes in keeping children safe in education around that, and what schools and college staff should do to identify and manage that. And really the opinion that they take is that staff should assume that it could happen here, and it probably is happening here in schools. So, they should be looking out for that kind of thing. The other area that kind of fits into this is that they identify that students might not be ready to speak about that abuse. So simply assuming that students are going to come to staff, going to come to DSLs and disclose that this kind of thing is happening is a little bit naive. So, staff should be aware that they're not going to be ready to talk about it. So there should be measures in place to help try and unearth that without simply relying on children disclosing that to staff. So these are two areas that we obviously support and feel very strongly around, and we feel that digital monitoring is a great way to help bolster these and provide that support to students. But we're going to be responding to this consultation formally. So we'd love to hear your views and feedback on that. And if you wanted to, feedback to the DFE on your views, then this is an open consultation process that anybody involved in safeguarding students can get involved with. So yeah, it's something that we'd definitely recommend. Okay, so that's the KITSI consultation. What we'd like to do now is just very quickly just fire up the first poll. So hopefully it'll only take you a couple of seconds to fill this in. And really what we're looking at is, of all the concerns regarding safeguarding that you've got at the moment, is there any of these that stands out more than any other? So we recognise that, and hopefully you can see this on your screen. I can see some of you have already responded. Obviously, all of these are important. As professionals involved in safeguarding students, I don't think we'd ever say that any of these are not important, but clearly, what we're looking for is, what do you think is the most important? What's more prominent now than any other? Okay, so yeah, thanks very much for feeding that back. I will keep it open for another couple of seconds, but I think, the two outstanding ones that are kind of coming through there are other mental health concerns. I think that we all recognise that the impact of the pandemic hasn't gone away, and that there's still a lot of trauma and stress that's causing pupils on a day-to-day basis. So I think that that's accurately reflected in there. But it's, the well-being of our students' mental health is an overriding concern that is often a starting point for other types of concerns. So, students that are involved in bullying, violence, drug abuse are often because of underlying mental health concerns and things that are affecting them in their day-to-day life.
I think, Rob, as well, we've just got, Kerry's just mentioned in the chat, and Patrick too, it's the bullying and violence, but it's also the subtle bullying and the unseen bullying and the abuse that's going on, that's so subtle, that's so under the radar, that can be an issue as well. It's not obvious.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that really supports the next thing that I wanted to talk about, which is, I'll just stop that and move on, is what we kind of call this iceberg effect. So, when we think about risks and kind of behaviors and actions of students, there are certain things that are very easy to see, or certainly more prominent to see, kind of the iceberg above the water. So these are the things that, you might see a student in the corridor, in a classroom, and be able to identify things like changes in their behavior and their mood, physical things like injuries and bruises, deterioration in academic performance, absenteeism, them coming forward for help, things that about their domestic situation and risks associated with that, maybe from siblings or other things, and kind of tip-offs and concerns from other students or members of staff. These are those kind of above the water things that you can see with your own eyes, hear with your own ears as you engage with students and wander around the school. But below the surface, we've got all of these digital risks that are a lot harder to see. And yeah, to Karen's point, these are the underlying things that are not immediately obvious that digital monitoring can help bring to the forefront. And obviously, by bringing them to the forefront, allows you all as DSLs, education professionals, and involved in safeguarding students, help you give that assistance to students and look after their well-being. So what we're looking at here is things like online conversations that students are having with others around drugs, extremism, self-harm or others being harmed, or an intention to harm. Things like, which is really becoming a really prominent thing, around like incel extremism behavior. This is something that we've seen really explode over the last 6 months, is this kind of what started as an internet sort of subculture around celibate, particularly males, having very, very strange views about feminism and the role of women in society. And this has led in the US to even school shootings. So we're seeing this kind of incel behavior that's very much a digital activity as a real concern among students that can lead to other very harmful behavior. We've got things like chat room conversations with inappropriate adults. We're seeing this on things like Discord and websites like Omegle, which are very, very high risk areas for this kind of inappropriate behavior. Online bullying and violence, again, this kind of child-on-child abuse that can happen. Self-generated sexual content. So this is, Kixie talks a lot about this, consensual image sharing, which might be, two children sharing images of an explicit nature, but also things like sharing non-consensual imagery. So, this kind of, a student consensually shares an image with another, but then that image is shared again without that initial student's consent. But overly abusive language, which, if students are in chat rooms or in forums or, posting on websites, overly abusive language, this can be an underlying risk that could be because of their mental health, but it could be because of their domestic situation that's causing them to have a lot of pent-up anger and aggression. So this is something that can help inform that situation. Over on the right, we've got feelings and emotions typed in a document, even if they delete that document. So we still see a lot of children, typing in Word documents. Maybe it's a journal, a diary, maybe it's just them venting in Word. They don't ever save this or share this. They might just delete it, but it's an outlet for their emotions that you wouldn't ordinarily see. We talk about harmful image sharing, which, leads into that self-generated sexual content. Child-on-child abuse, we've covered that, but there's, a lot of that going on. We've got their searches, their digital kind of fingerprint in terms of what they're looking for on the internet, which can reveal underlying concerns around suicide, self-harm, eating disorders, and other types of behavior. And also oversharing personal information. This could be something that's a very clear indicator of risks, such as them, talking to a stranger and revealing where they live and things like that, which, I think we all recognize could be a sign that they're being groomed, but also just that kind of tendency for students to, overshare things about themselves with strangers. We saw this a lot in lockdown, where kids were kind of starved of social contact, and they were just sharing with strangers things about their daily life, what's going on with them. And that can be, a concern, because we don't know who's on the other end of that conversation. So there's many more digital risks that, we don't see, but using a digital monitoring tool can really help reveal those. And then again, allow you to give that support to that student that they might need. That's the iceberg effect. Some of the kind of myths around digital monitoring. We looked at all of those things in the iceberg underneath the surface, and a lot of people might think, well, am I going to be bombarded with false positives? Is it just somebody's typed this in a chat and it's going to bombard me and say, oh, there might be a risk here? Well, that's really where the human moderation comes in. So we've got a team of trained expert moderators who review everything before it goes through to the school. So these moderators, they don't know these students. They have to take a fairly objective view of what's coming through and say, is this a risk? Is this not? They're going to err on the side of caution. They have to, because they don't know this student. But that human review process allows the system to eliminate a lot of false positives, things where perhaps it's just a misspelling of a word that a kind of tool that isn't human moderated would be flagging through to the school. The moderation team can sift through that and eliminate those false positives, but also allow the really serious stuff to be brought to your immediate attention with a phone call. But does this replace the role of a DSL? Absolutely not. The moderation team is an extra pair of eyes and ears to look out for students and identify these risks. But the role of a DSL is still absolutely crucial to take that information, put it in context of everything else they know about the student and their circumstances, and offer them support. So actually, it allows that DSL to be more effective. They're spending less time reviewing things like false positives and spending more time talking with students, talking with, third-party organizations that can help support the students. And it just really allows that DSL to be more effective. So absolutely not a replacement for a DSL. Can it spy on children through their webcams? No. This is not a tool that hooks into the webcam and monitors everything they're doing. There may be situations where, if that child is sharing their webcam and there's some activity that goes on there that is flagged through to the school, that we would monitor that. But we've got very robust processes in place to ensure that we don't capture any imagery that would be illegal. So we need to make sure that, we're not creating any particular issues around that. But it's very limited. We would only be capturing that if there was something of concern there, which of course the school would want to know about. Is it breaching a child's right to privacy? We've got a balance to strike here between that child's right to privacy and our legal duty to safeguard students in our care. So the government guidance through Keeping Children Safe in Education is very clear that schools have this responsibility to monitor students' online and digital activity in order to keep them safe and ensure their well-being. So, there is a balance there that we have to take, but I think, that everybody's clear that tools like this are necessary to ensure that. But we also want to ensure that we keep that child's right to privacy in mind and that we're not overstepping any boundaries. And it's something that we continually question ourselves on in terms of the technology and how that works. Is it surveillance? I think surveillance is a bit of a strong word. Everything we do is based on keeping children safe in education, the government guidance and legislation. And there's a very clear purpose to what we're doing, which is keeping children safe and ensuring their well-being. So I wouldn't call it surveillance. I'd call it it's digital monitoring. It's ensuring their well-being. And finally, do we send the risk to the government? No. We raise everything to the school. So if there's anything there, there are certain legal responsibilities that schools have around reporting, particularly terrorism, extremism, FGM, and any other illegal activity. Schools are responsible for flagging that to the authorities. We don't ever send anything to the government. We rely on the school to fulfill that legal duty. Okay, so some of the myths. Obviously, if there are any other myths that you know about or any thoughts you've had, feel free to use the chat to share those. But yeah, we'll move on to the next poll. So again, very quick one. Hopefully the last one wasn't too arduous. So what we've got here is a poll. What are your biggest concerns around the operational side of digital safety? So we talked about how it works, but when it comes to actually implementing that, what are your biggest concerns? And you can choose multiple ones here. So we've got lack of time or resource, the technical side of deploying that solution, the missing a child that might be at risk, the budget, your knowledge and understanding of emerging risks, or any others that you can think of. And again, with other, feel free to stick that in the chat. So yeah, widespread here. I think these are all concerns that we'll talk about in the next slide. But yeah, all really valid what you're thinking about there. So yeah, practicalities around that. As we talked about in the poll, really, lack of time resource was probably the top answer. Around, yeah, I think about half of you said lack of time resource. I think there's two sides when we think about the practicalities of digital monitoring. There's the management of it in terms of the DSL and the safeguarding team, and then there's the IT side in terms of the technical deployment and management of the digital monitoring solution. So when we look at the DSL side, yes, there will need to be regular checks on the alerts that are coming through. And as we mentioned before, with Smoothwall Monitor, you're going to get a phone call for the immediate urgent issues. So there's no need to sort of, set aside time to go in and check those. You'll be notified straight away. But for kind of lower alerts, things that are coming through via email, you might want to set aside a bit of time to review those. And possibly, some of the lower level alerts that might come through as well. We'll have a look just after this slide in the monitor portal, so we can see how those actually come through. But if we're thinking about digital monitoring, there's two main solutions. There's a monitored solution where the human moderation team curate those first, and there's what you might call a self-monitored solution as well, where you actually review all the alerts. So actually comparing a managed solution like Smoothwall versus one that's not managed, it actually gives you a lot of time back because you don't have to review everything. But it gives you that peace of mind as well that there is also a team of people that are looking through those, so that if there are any if there are any imminent urgent risks, that you're going to get that phone call through. But yeah, certainly time, there's a little bit of time that's needed to help identify these risks, but hopefully that's something that gives you the information you need to support students better. But in education, lack of time resource is always going to be an issue, whatever we're talking about. From the deployment side, Smoothwall Monitor is a very easy solution to deploy. What we're talking about is a piece of client software, an agent that's deployed onto devices. That's Windows, Mac, Chromebooks, and iPads. Very easy and quick to deploy. So I don't know if we've got any IT people in with us today, but it should be very straightforward to deploy, much like any other piece of software. So yeah, just loading that into your deployment software, through Google, Active Directory, Intune, click a few buttons, and then that can be out to all of your devices. But we also at Smoothwall provide that help and support to get that deployed. So our team can help you get that on those devices as quickly as possible. But once that's on there, there's very little for IT to do. Obviously, just making sure that any new devices that you might acquire are getting the software installed. But that's the same for any piece of software like antivirus, Office tools. This is kind of bread and butter stuff for IT to get deployed. So yeah, just very quickly wanted to just throw up the monitor portal just so we can look at how these alerts might come through. So we look at monitor through the portal. We can see our organisation. So if we're a multi-academy trust or responsible for multiple schools, we can look at those schools either individually or as a whole. And we look at the events, we can see what's come through. And these are graded by level. So 3s, 4s, and 5s are the more serious incidents. 1s and 2s are kind of more lower level. So 1 or 2 might be, a student in a class doing a piece of schoolwork around drugs. We want to record that that's happened, but it's not an urgent issue because, we can clearly see it's part of their schoolwork and their curriculum. So 3s, 4s, and 5s, we can see here, a level 5 vulnerable person alert. So this would have generated a phone call through to the school. We can see here that the user searched for self-harm sites. And this is a moderation message that's typed by the moderator. So this allows you to see exactly why the moderator has flagged this as an urgent issue. So you get that kind of context around why they want to raise that to you. And we can see what they've actually typed, see the screenshot around that, so actually what they were doing. And we can see what else that student was doing at that time. So having that grading of levels really helps focus your time on more serious incidents, and the different categories of content allow you to identify certain risks in different areas. But you can also reveal some of those lower level incidents through the portal as well. But by having the different levels, the grading, the email alerts, and the phone calls, it really allows you to balance your time. You don't have to be in here all the time looking for things. You can rely on the phone calls and the emails and maybe check the portal once a week, something like that. So some of the questions that we've had through in advance of the meeting, and obviously we've got lots in the chat as well. I don't know if you want to kind of go through these, Karen?
Yeah, I will actually, Rob. And just a shout out to everybody. Some of you have messaged to say that you've not been able to see people's questions. You've just been able to see my answers. And I think that was a bug on our end. So apologies to that. So we're going to read out every question so nobody misses anything. So let me go right back up to the top. Will there be a copy of the slides afterwards? Several people have asked that. Yes, we're going to share this recording afterwards. So you can share it with colleagues. You can go back and reflect on it. And after you've done that, any questions, enquiries@smoothwall.com, I'm on the other end of that email and I'll help you, give you everything, all the support that you need. Question from Mel, Rob, how can I change who the alerts come to? At the moment, they don't come through to the DSL.
Okay, yeah, if you've already got it and they're not coming through, in the monitor portal, what we have on the organizations tab is for each of your schools that you're responsible for, and that might just be one of them, you have different types of contacts, and the safeguarding contacts are who the email alerts and the phone calls come to. So if they're not going to the right person or people, you can either come in here and edit those, or you can add new ones in here. So just put in their name, email, phone number, and any notes, perhaps around, if they only work certain days of the week or certain times, then you can put in the notes there as well. But any problems with that, do feel free to get in touch with us. I'd be more than happy to help you with that.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Mel. Next question's from Abdul. Do all risks recorded show in CPOMs if CPOMs is linked?
So CPOMs, My Concern and Safeguard, only the level 3+ events go into that. So it would only be the serious events. As I mentioned before, there might be some lower level 1s and 2s that are not immediate concerns. So the feedback we've had is that people don't want those necessarily going into the students' records in CPOMs. We're going to offer more flexibility in that later this year to allow you to decide what does and doesn't go into CPOMs. But also when it goes through to CPOMs, it goes into the kind of the inbox, the in tray. So that gives you another opportunity then to say, actually, I want to discard this. This isn't relevant. It doesn't need to go into that student's record.
Great. Thanks, Abdul. Thanks, Rob. Kirsty says, we use Smoothwall and CPOMs. I wasn't aware that CPOMs could be alerted automatically. How do I go about setting this up?
Yep. So if you just get in touch with our team, they'll be able to set that up for you. Or if we've got their details, we can sort that out from our end and get in touch with you.
Yeah, Kirsty, I'll follow up with you afterwards on that. I'll make sure that someone contacts you about that. Kerry talks about unseen bullying, which we mentioned before. Jonathan asks, is the direct messaging of DSLs live now or a feature to come? Also, how does Smoothwall link into CPOMs? Does it do that now?
Yeah, so yes, it can integrate with CPOMs right now. So again, if that's something you want to get set up, just let us know. The direct messaging to DSLs is emails and by phone call. So as I showed before, you can set those up in the safeguarding contacts in the portal. But if there's any problems around that, they're not getting notified and they should be, again, just let us know.
Great. Pat was making the comment around controlling behaviour in the family that can lead to mental health concerns. And I think that was a point where we were talking about unseen risks before. Everything's interconnected, right? So an area in one area, an issue in one area of a child's life can then have a knock-on effect and can manifest in something completely unrelated. So it's all interconnected, and it just underlines the point about having physical eyes and ears, crucial, but also having this ability to see below the iceberg at a very early stage as well as immediate risks to health or life as well. So everything working together to scan the interconnectivity of all the different issues that are surrounding kids in their lives today. Powerful stuff. Patrick talks about online abuse on social media out of school times, a massive issue for pupils in their primary school. Thanks for that, Patrick. Yeah, Sue was saying that she loves the iceberg image. Thanks, Sue. It's a really easy way we found to try and communicate the risks you can see with the risks you can't. We do hear schools say, we have no concern, we have no risks in our school online, it doesn't exist. But without a solution like digital monitoring, how do you know? You can't see what you can't see, right? So we find that that's a really good way to convey the difference between seen and unseen risks.
Yeah, I think it's something that, was talked about a lot last year with, that kind of, there's a lot in the press around sexual abuse of children, child on child abuse, where the, sources were saying, assume it is happening. If you're not looking at digital, how do you know? I think the assumption should be in a lot of cases that it could and possibly is happening right now, and we're just not seeing it. So this can help reveal that.
I think that's really important, because Ofsted said in their abuse review that came out last May was, like Rob says, assume it's happening even if you have no evidence of it. And we said, well, you how do you know how to address it if you've got no visibility of it? So things like digital monitoring, solutions like this, can actually reveal the context of what's going on so that you can intervene appropriately. And I think that's really important as well. Chris has asked, does the human element increase the cost to the end user?
The human element comes as standard with our solution. So yeah, I mean, undoubtedly, there is a cost to that, but we feel it's a very proportionate cost. And when you balance that against the cost of additional staff you might need to fulfill the requirements of monitoring students' digital activity, we feel that it's a very cost-effective way to do that versus hiring your own staff to walk around the classrooms and watch what everyone's doing, which is not really practical to do.
Yeah, Steve asked, which I answered in the chat, but I'll say it out loud because not everyone could see it. Is the monitoring 24/7? Yes, it's 24/7, 365 days a year.
Yeah,
answer that one. Is this product an add-on to current subscription? Arpit wanted to know.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got an existing contract with Smoothwall, we can add that to your existing contract, and it operates through the same portal as our other cloud products. So yeah, that's something we could definitely do.
Fantastic. Dan asked, does digital monitoring work on school devices when remote learning?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a huge thing for fairly obvious reasons over the last year or two. But yeah, this is monitoring school-owned devices wherever they might be, at school, at home, in a coffee shop, on holiday. It's all operating over the internet, so it doesn't have to talk to a server in your school or anything like that. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, questions coming in thick and fast. Thanks, everyone. VPNs. Simon has a question about VPNs. Can the system see what they are looking at if they use a VPN?
Yeah, absolutely. So it effectively is watching over their shoulder. So it doesn't matter if they're using a VPN. It even doesn't matter if they're not on the internet and disconnected. As soon as they come back online, it will send all that stuff through. So it's really monitoring exactly what they're typing and what's on their screen, as if you were stood right behind them and watching them. So whether it's a VPN or proxy site or whatever it is they're doing, it's monitoring that 24/7, 365.
Great. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Simon. Georgia asks, we're just about to go through a digital migration process so that our school will be on a system called Our Learning Cloud. Will devices all still be able to use Smoothwall on this?
They will, yes. I think I am familiar with Our Learning Cloud, and yes, that will be absolutely fine with that.
Question from Abdul again. How does it work with iPads?
So with iPads, it works by us having a custom browser on the iPad. So we've developed our own browser. It's actually based on Firefox. So we haven't just invented our own browser that doesn't work very well. We've taken Firefox, made a version of that that's got monitoring built into it. So everything that happens within that app will be monitored. It also works with our filtering as well, so they'll be filtered. We'd be happy to talk through the technical details of how that works, but effectively, it's the same principle. Whatever they're typing, whatever they're doing in there, we'll be monitoring that and relaying the alerts through to you as they happen.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Alex asks, is this deployment done remotely or physically?
Yeah, it can be remotely. It depends on how IT are managing the devices. The vast majority of schools have the ability to deploy software remotely now. So even if that child has got a device at home and they don't come into school, you can still install that software onto that device. So unless there's you're a very small school with no IT provision, no IT staff, it should be very, very straightforward to do. But in any case, our teams would work with you to ensure that we get it on there as easy as possible and take that burden off you.
Brilliant, thank you. Andy asks, how quick after the hit would you be in touch with the school DSL?
So as soon as our moderation team get that alert, as soon as they've reviewed that piece of information, if it is an urgent alert, they'll make that phone call straight away. Assuming that, and you can have multiple contacts in the system, we'll try and get through to whoever we can there. Again, if it's an email, that'll go through straight away as well. Typically, between the user doing something on that device and us raising it to the school, for high risk things like self-harm, suicide, or imminent risk of harm to a student, we aim to review that within 30 minutes.
We do get that there quicker than that, though, don't we, in reality, Rob? We say 30 minutes, but the reality can often be a lot quicker than that.
It can be, yeah. It depends on time of day and a lot of factors, but yeah.
Yeah. Mel wants to know, how do I access our portal?
So that's portal.smoothwall.cloud.
Rebecca wants to know the cost of this. We can follow up with Rebecca afterwards. Sue asks, as a long-established Smoothwall user, I cannot speak highly enough of what it offers us as a MAT. Monthly reports are invaluable. Just concerned that for some reason I have never accessed the portal. Can you tell me how?
Okay, yeah. I mean, if you can't access it maybe there's a reason your account's not set up correctly or something like that. So, we'll get in touch with you afterwards and see why that is. But yeah, everyone who uses Monitor should be able to go to that website. See if I can throw it up on the screen again.
Fine.
Portal.google.cloud, yeah.
Cool. Another question from Nelson regarding cost. Nelson, we'll follow up with you on that. The reason we do that is because if you've already got various of the Smoothwall products in situ, there's various discounts that we can offer as well. So we try and get you the best price we possibly can. So we'll follow up with you on that. Fikri asks, what about student personal devices? Where we cannot deploy the agent software?
Yeah, so we don't currently really do any monitoring of students' own devices. I guess there's two reasons. One is technically there's no way for us to really force that on there. It's their own device, they're in control of it, so they could just uninstall it. The other side is that kind of student privacy balance. While technically you could put it on there, they might uninstall it, but you could do. I think it's about striking that balance between the students' privacy and the right to kind of protect them and safeguard them, but also the responsibility between a parent and the school. There are parental control tools out there for parents to use, and we would obviously advocate the use of those on personal devices. But yeah, we don't really see personal devices being monitored too much for those reasons.
Okay. We've got about 34 messages still to get through, so we're going to get through these as quick as we can. Thank you, everybody. If we don't manage to get through all of them, we will stay online if anybody wants to stay online, if that's all right. If you can do that, Rob.
Yeah,
We'll keep going to make sure we've answered every single question. And apologies if you have to drop off and you've asked a question. Email me at inquiries@smoothwall.com. We'll get that answer to you. Gareth asks, Smoothwall digital monitoring, do we need to move to a cloud version of Smoothwall, or can we still have the local on-site Smoothwall boxes that work with this software?
So it operates really independent of the filtering products. So if you're not using the cloud filter, you can still use Monitor. But if you are, they work together fine as well. So yeah, it can be completely standalone of your filtering deployment. You don't have to be a Smoothwall filter customer either. But there are benefits if you're using both products together.
Right, thanks, Gareth. Pat asks, do all DSLs get messages? Large schools have lots of DSLs.
Yeah, so we've got a new piece of functionality this year where you can set up different groups. So you might say, for example, all the alerts for year 7 go to the head of year 7, all the alerts for staff go to the head teacher rather than the DSL. You can set up those different groups and those different alerting groups so that you can route those different alerts to different people.
Okay, and I think the next two questions are interlinked. First one's from Maureen, and she says, is there any differences in regulation between overseeing children, young persons under 18? We have mixed age groups, the youngest 16 years, but we're concerned any limitations on monitoring the slightly older learner. Does that make sense?
Sort of, yeah. I think, the product does operate and work fine with people over 18. Obviously, the type of concerns might be different. So what we find is that, we do work with post 16 learners, that there are certain things that you're less concerned about. So you might disable certain categories or not want to monitor those. But yeah, also with the groups, if you wanted to say, I only want to monitor my under 18s and not monitor the over 18s, that's something you could set up as well.
I think you're in FE, Maureen, am I correct? And then Adam, similar question around permissions. Is it possible to monitor only students and not staff on shared computers based on security groups? This was something we were told was going to be implemented, but I don't know if it was actually happened. Yeah,
we're just in the process of rolling that out now. So we've got the kind of the first early adopter customers on that functionality, and hopefully we'll have that for you soon. But we'll take your details and get in touch about that.
Yeah, Adam, your CS manager will be in touch with you as soon as that's live. Holly asks, can I be contacted too regarding linking CPOMs with Smoothwall? Yes, Holly, we're making a list of all the questions that we've got where we're going to follow back up with you afterwards. So we'll make sure that you get that information that you need. And Nelson asks, how does it link to Safeguard?
In the same way CPOMs, so CPOMs, My Concern and Safeguard. Safeguard is our own safeguarding record keeping system. Same way. So level 3+ events automatically sent into there and go into the inbox where you can then assign them to the chronology for the student.
Great. Mel wants to be contacted about CPOMS 2, got your Mel. And also Yvonne wants CPOMS 2, got you Yvonne too. We'll follow up with you. And Andy Hutchinson's asking about the cost of the package as well. So we'll follow up with you on that, Andy, and understand a bit more about your setting and how we can drive down costs for you as much as we can. Adam wants to know, does it work on Android devices?
Not currently, no. We don't see a huge amount of Android users in the UK in education, particularly with managed devices. But it's something that, if there's enough demand, we can certainly look at. So, we'll definitely feedback that to our product management team, and maybe they might want to get in touch to find out more about how you use Android devices. Great.
Andy says it looks great, by the way. Thanks, Andy. We're very passionate about this solution. It saves lives. It's very, very powerful. Karen says, could we please be contacted to CPOMS? Absolutely, Karen, we've got you. Ben says, will the safeguarding report that's generated every week on my in-house box be made redundant if we bring this in? It's just lately there's been a barrage of alerts wasting time for me and the DSLs for image servers, adverts that's not even shown.
Yeah, so this is the difference between the monitor product alerts and the filtering product alerts. So without getting too technical, the filtering product looks at, just every single website they're accessing. So it knows nothing about the intent or the context around what that user's doing. Whereas monitor is actually looking at their activity, their behavior, and what's on the screen. So it's more accurate. There's more context about how that works. So in some ways, it's complementary to the alerts that you get through filter, but in other ways, it does supersede them because it is more detailed and more contextual. So yeah, you could probably disable those if you were using monitor.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben. Marius, I hope I've pronounced that correctly. When are you planning to add an option to send alerts for certain users based on username? We had Policy Central previously and could direct staff violations to head teacher and pupils from various year groups to head of year. With Smoothwall, it all now goes to the DSL and then has to be emailed to other users.
Yeah, so that's something that we're rolling out at the moment. So yeah, we'll get in touch with you about that.
Great. Dawn wants to be contacted around CPOMS. Absolutely, Dawn. We'll sort that out for you. Tim says, to help build a business case for investment, it would be helpful to have a statement that demonstrates the need for alerting to safeguarding teams, as opposed to just blocking access to inappropriate websites. Is there a government description of exactly what monitoring covers? As a college, we filter access and can pull off reports for students, but this is post any event and not proactive.
Yeah, I think that's something that we can take offline, Karen, and
yeah.
We can best support that case.
I'll come back to you on that, Tim, because the Safer Internet Centre talks about the difference between physical monitoring, active monitoring and proactive monitoring, and when each of those might be more suitable. And we were very much involved in working with Safer Internet Centre on understanding those definitions. So I will send you a link to that, because that might be really helpful for you. Andy Hutchinson says, I may have missed this, apologies. This system only works through school-owned devices with the software downloaded and through school Wi-Fi, ?
Not just school Wi-Fi, wherever that device is. So it can be at home, but typically it would only be school managed devices. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to speed up a little bit because we've got another 48 messages to get through. I think we need to rerun this webinar, actually. Nick asks, what if you have a physical Smoothwall box?
Yeah, it can work alongside it. It can work without it. We're looking at in the future about how the two products can integrate and work better together, particularly in terms of the data that they produce. But at the moment, there's no dependency on it. It can work totally fine with it. It can work totally fine without it.
Great, thank you. Tim asks, what about students' own mobile phones that use 3G or 4G? Is there a responsibility to monitor students using devices not connected to the institution's network?
I don't think there's any legal or statutory responsibility to monitor them. There's an expectation that if they're using school devices that there is, but not necessarily for their personal devices. No.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Arpit asks, can the reports be customized to generate reports based on each year group or tutor group?
So yeah, what we're working with the group setup that I talked about that we're releasing now, that'll set up the alerts just for particular groups that someone's associated with. Yeah. So year 7, head of year 7 gets year 7 alerts, that kind of thing.
Right, thanks, Arpit. Andy asks, does it work when using Smoothwall? Does it work when using school Wi-Fi, like our current Smoothwall package?
No, it's wherever that user is.
Okay. Thanks, Andy. Maureen asks, can this system be implemented through system monitoring, i.e. MS Teams, accessed over the internet, but not necessarily accessed by college equipment?
Not currently. Something we're investigating. So this would be if they're using Microsoft Teams on their own personal device, could it still monitor because they're using the school's Teams account? Something we're investigating, but it's not currently able to do that. Okay. Obviously, if they're using Teams on a school device, that's fine. We'll monitor everything they're doing in Teams.
Thank you. We're not getting down this message list at all. They're just coming in abundance. Okay, fast as we can. Tom, does digital monitoring depend on us having a Smoothwall firewall, or is it totally independent?
Totally independent. Yeah.
Totally independent. Christopher, if we have staff and pupil shared devices, can the monitor detect this and only report student activity?
Yeah, that's something that's being rolled out at the moment. Yeah, it rely on them obviously logging into that with a username that was either staff or student. But yes, that's something we can do now.
Right. Adam says, what about things like personal banking, logins, passwords, etc.? Does this also get captured and monitored?
So there's rules in there to detect when things look like passwords or banking details, or if they're on a particular banking website where it will not monitor that. So that there's rules in there to safeguard against us capturing that information.
Okay, great. Nelson says, thank you. Very welcome, Nelson. Joe says, could you allow me to, regarding costs, we currently have Smoothwall web filter and firewall. Yeah, Joe, we'll be straight back in touch with you. Absolutely. Mel says, please, could you follow up with me about logging into the portal? Yeah, absolutely, Mel. We'll come back to you on that. Mark says, I heard there was development underway that allowed student incidents to go to one team, whereas staff incidents could go to the head or the principal. Is this available yet?
Yeah, so that's what we were rolling out at the moment. So we will we'll get in touch with you about that when that's ready.
Fikri, you're welcome. Just saying thank you. Ben says, I'm just wondering about how I can set up parental controls, etc., at our students' homes.
That's something that we'll probably follow up with afterwards. There's recommendations around what parents might do to safeguard students at home. Yeah, we'll follow up around that afterwards.
Okay, guys, we're on the hour. We're going to carry on. If anybody wants to stay to hear the rest of these questions answered, please do. If you need to drop off, don't worry. If your question's not answered yet, we'll email you separately and make sure that we get that answer to you. But we're going to push on because there's just too many questions coming in. So Steve says, unfortunately, I suspect that much of the high risk stuff is happening on own devices with own mobile data, so invisible to any institution control solution.
Yeah, I mean, that's always going to be a risk, but we can only do what we can do. We can't follow our students around 24/7. We've got a clear responsibility and duty to safeguard them when they're at school and on school devices. I'm sure we'd love to be able to monitor every single thing they do, but yeah, I think our DSLs might struggle with that. But yeah, I totally take your point, and we have to do the best we can do, I guess.
Future direction though, Steve. Yeah, that's down the line. I mean, interesting. Ben says, if a student tries to uninstall the client, is there any password protection, etc.?
So it relies on your own controls that you might have in the school to stop them uninstalling antivirus or uninstalling Word. If they're managed devices, then that protection is already there inherently.
Okay, Liz was late. Don't worry, Liz, we'll send you the recording afterwards so you can watch it at leisure. No problem at all. Arshad said, I noticed you merged with eSafe. Are you using their agent for monitoring?
No, we're not. So we're migrating all eSafe customers to our agent and our software. So yeah, we're not using that eSafe software anymore. Okay.
Christelle, could someone please get in contact regarding linking Smoothwall and Radar? Radar, that's an old name, that, Christine. We've not called it Radar for some time. To my concern, yes, we'll be back in touch with you about that and show you what to do. James asks, interesting in costing for a MAT and individual schools. We'll come back to you, James, absolutely. Mark says, could I be contacted about CPOM's integration? Absolutely, Mark. Kewell says, we already have a Smoothwall appliance in school, but under a centrally managed child node. Due to IT time monitoring was passed to the LEA. Is this something they will be using? Can IT in the school have access? We have become a KMAT with another school. Can the two sites be linked?
Probably. I need to find out more information about what the LEA is doing, which LEA is, but I'm certain that we can do that for you.
Okay. Caroline wants contacting Smoothwall TPOMs. We're on it, Caroline. We'll come back to you. Thank you. Crystal says, we have 300 pupils on iPads and we are overwhelmed by the number of captures each day. This is usually screen grabs of websites they have accessed rather than what they have typed. Is there a way of getting around this?
Need to have a look into that and see what it is you're actually using, whether it's the Monitor product or not. I suspect it isn't, but we'll investigate that afterwards and get
yeah. Something not right there. We'll look into that. Andy wants us to follow up with more info. Absolutely, Andy, will do. Thanks for coming. Can we have the alerts linked to My Concern? Marius wants to know, can we have the alerts linked to My Concern? Yes,
yeah.
We'll follow up with you on that. Yes, same question, wasn't it? Arpit, thank you. Got in touch with Emma. Fantastic. I'll make sure she's received that. Anthony says, thank you, Karen Rao. Fantastic product. Thanks, Anthony. Much appreciated. I have to leave for another, that's fine. I think you're very informative. I'm interested in the cost of monitoring. Please, can you get in touch? Rita, yes, we'll be in touch with you. Absolutely. Tom says, interested in getting more informed pricing for a Mac, please. Yes, Tom, absolutely. Jenny says, can you contact me about linking with My Concern? No need to read the question out loud. Sorry, Jenny, I've just started reading it. Yes, we'll be in touch with you about linking to My Concern. That was funny. You're welcome, Christine. She's just thanking us for the presentation, and we will be sharing the recording. I think we're getting to the end. Any chance you're doing another webinar recording, as I only have just managed to log on and have missed the majority of the webinar? Jacqueline, don't worry, we're going to send you the recording anyway, so you can watch it at your leisure. There, we've done.
Right. I think you were an auctioneer or a bingo caller in a previous.
I think that was an absolute record of questions, wasn't it? How wonderful.
Yeah. Well, fantastic. Yeah, that's really great. Thanks for sticking around and being so engaged in it. It's good to see you're all as passionate about this as we are. But yeah, I think, what's next? We'll obviously share the recording afterwards with anyone. And obviously, if there's any questions, we'll get in touch with those people directly. But if you wanted to book a demo, ask about a free trial or any other questions, use the email on screen, inquiries@smoothwall.com.
Yeah, we'll sort that out for you straight away. I'm on the other end of that email. So is my colleague Adele, 24/7, quite literally sometimes. We're here to help. Whatever we can do, we're here.
Lovely. Right, well, thanks very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day and hopefully speak to you all soon.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Bye.